I never, ever thought that my way of making money would be just sitting down and chatting to people. Life is way too short for me to think, well, I've already invested so much time in it. It took me so long to get this job. I should try it out for a bit longer. I don't believe in that.
Someone watching this today might have a dream. They might have some goals they want to achieve, but there's something stopping them. What would you say to that person to help them pursue their dreams?
Remembering that at any point in your life, you have a choice. Even if your back is against the wall, you still have a choice.
So we're just about to shoot an episode with Dr. Sheen. Dr. Sheen is actually a doctor, also a researcher who transitioned into helping empower women and helping them find their voice through personal branding. Now you might be wondering why personal branding is important. Well, in today's age, whether you want to build a business or you want to create a following, personal branding is one of the most important things that you can do for yourself. And on this episode, we're going to learn more about which platforms you should use, how to build an audience, how you get your audience to actually engage with you, and if you want, how to build a lucrative business around it. So join us for this exciting episode, and please subscribe if you haven't. It really helps us on the show, and let us know what is your number one question on personal branding. Looking forward to seeing you inside this episode. Sheen Gurrib. Sheen, looking at your background, born in Mauritius, studied in the UK, moved to Dubai, worked as a COO for a few companies. Now you have your own podcast. I see a lot of things happening in your journey. Can you tell us how does that tie into your pursuit of freedom?
I think for me, when I talk about freedom, when it comes to my career, it was always very important to me to have freedom of my time. And that's something that I was struggling with, and I never knew why I wasn't happy in the different jobs that I was in. And the underlying issue was that I cannot control my time. I cannot go to the dentist in the middle of the day because I need to ask someone for that. And all of these things really bothered me. And now I would like to say that I have more control over, and I definitely work more than I have ever worked in my life, but I do have the freedom of my time.
Quite a massive list. I can ask you a lot of questions about that,
Please.
but the first thing I want to start with is just looking at your journey. I mean, leaving at 18, studying material science, and all the different shifts that you've had in your career. It seems that you weren't afraid to change. And one thing that I noticed that's holding a lot of people back, a lot of people who also have a dream they want to pursue, is that they are afraid of change. I mean, most people live in the same city. Most people, if they choose a career, whether they like it or not, they stick to it. They might have ideas of starting a business, or someone else could have advised them to start a business, as Ali did for you, and they overthink it. So the first question I guess I want to know is why do people struggle with change, and how has it become easy for you? Or maybe it's not easy, but you make it look easy.
That's exactly what I was about to say. I think I am someone who's extremely reluctant to change, but it does not look that way. And it's only looking back that you can connect the dots of how things aligned. But while I was going through the process, it wasn't something that was easy. It wasn't something I wanted at all. For me, every time I was forced to change and make a move, is where I was forced, and it's just because the unhappiness was too high. And I think to answer your question, again, I think there's three factors really for me whenever it comes to change, right? The first one is being surrounded with the right support network, right? So whether it is people or mentors who can professionally give you advice and you rely on that advice knowing that they know what they're talking about. So if they're telling me this is bad for my career, I need to move on. And also support comes from family. So the reason I was able to leave at 18 was because my sister was already in the UK studying, and then she made that transition so much easier for me. And for her, I can't even imagine how hard it was. She was the first one in the family to go to the UK, and she paved that way for me. And it meant that I was able to go to Oxford because now we understood a little bit better how things worked. So having that support is number one in order to give you that safety net of go try it. We're here to help you in any way we can. So that's one thing that definitely helped. Even for me, I mean, I was, a nerd who did very well in school, went to the best universities. So obviously you can imagine for my parents, for me to now become an influencer is not necessarily what they imagined where I would land. But again, they were supportive and they don't understand this whole industry, but they were like, okay, we don't get it. But if this is something you want to try, sure, we will help you as much as we can. We're here if you need anything. And they would still kind of like celebrate the little wins with me. So that makes a huge difference. Because another question I get asked a lot is, how did you convince your parents? I didn't have to. And also they didn't like that I was working so hard and they were here on holiday. We couldn't go out for dinner because I was still adjusting some slides until 12, So then they saw as well that this is not the best fulfilling life for me. So that's number one, support. The number two thing is I like to, I guess this comes from being a consultant, I really work on the 80-20 rule. So I move really quickly. I make decisions fast because I will think, okay, let's look at what are the main underlying pros and cons here. And if the cons are things that affect a big majority of my life, I will immediately decide that this is a bad thing for me. I am not a believer in the whole sunk cost fallacy of, well, I've already invested so much time in it. It took me so long to get this job. I should try it out for a bit longer. I don't believe in that because at the end of the day, life is way too short for me to think, oh, well, I've already invested this much time in it. I might as well stick to it. So that's one thing that, again, helps me to make decision fast and move on to the next thing. And I think one thing that has come from experience, which is the main third thing, is that I've done it so many times now that I know that for me, the solution and the happiness is on the other side of an uncomfortable change. And being uncomfortable is great because it means you're out of your comfort zone. And this is where the magic happens, as they say. And being able to push yourself into that zone of being uncomfortable means that you are uncomfortable because you're new and you're a beginner. No one likes being a beginner. And you're trying to shift something in order for your life experience to get better. And the way I look at it is I have two options, and you always have options, by the way. You have two options. Either you stick where you are and you remain unhappy, but nothing will get worse probably and nothing will get better. Fine. Status quo of what you know. But the other option is something better might happen. Even if it's 1% likelihood of something can improve, why would you not try that? And I always think of it like that you can always come back to the initial situation, whether it was leaving a job, leaving an industry, you can always come back. It might take a bit long, but you will come back. So that's why I think there's never really any big kind of like roadblocks when it comes to change. And I want to reiterate that change is not easy. No one likes it. I've never met anyone who thinks, oh yeah, this is not great, not working out for me, this is exciting, let's change. No, everyone hates it. And I love discussing this on my podcast. This is a question I ask all the time. How do you approach major pivots in your life? And I kid you not, like 90% of the results are that, I cry first and then I deal with it later. And I think that's normal. That's how I do it as well. I will whine and cry about something I don't want to do first because it's a human reaction to things. And then you start to strategize on what the next moves are. But yeah, change is uncomfortable and that's just the nature of it. But it also brings with it really good things.
One thing I love that you said is that, you're okay with dealing with pain now because you're thinking more about the outcome on the other side. In fact, it's one of the things I always tell my kids. It's like, hey, you can enjoy life now and then suffer later, or you suffer now and and enjoy life later. When you also, part of change is also discovering what you really want. But a lot of people want to find out what they want first and then pursue that. Do you agree with that? Or do you feel like sometimes you might have to try 5, 6, 7 different things because you might not like all of them, but the one thing is for certain is that you don't like what you're doing now. So like you said, might as well try others. So how do you, which school of thought are you? Like, are you more about just trying and being an adventurer and then hoping that you discover something?
So that's a very good question. I think this has evolved for me over time. At the start, I was those people who I wanted to know what was next first and then move towards that. It was because I'm someone who's used to structure, to having, clear goals and working towards it. So that not having a lot of that would be too stressful for me, and having to manage too many triggers of my anxiety. So then that would make it a bit more difficult. But now, having done it so many times, and even just looking back at my little path that I have had so far, it's a lot of it are things that I could not have predicted, things that I didn't even know existed. Like even when I was in school or at university a few years ago, the jobs that I'm doing now did not exist back then. So then I could have never picked that to work towards. So that's one thing that I also talk about a lot now, is that you need to have a general direction of where you want to go, but you don't need to have a goal in mind. You don't need to know exactly what job you want or exactly what project you want to work on, but just knowing what are the things that fulfills you, what are the things that you really want to be doing more of, especially on your day-to-day basis. I really like this specific kind of task that I do. I love meeting people, so that meeting people should become a huge factor of your day-to-day. But that once you have that and you start working on it, you discover things along the route, which is exactly what happened to me. I never ever thought that my way of making money would be just sitting down and chatting to people, right? And this is so funny because I also mention this all the time. The one comment all of my teachers had for me throughout my lifetime in school was that bright student, very talkative. So that was one thing I always got told off for. And now the fact that I can monetize this, I want to tell all my teachers, see, there was a reason for it. But so I think this is not something I could have worked towards. So I think giving yourself that flexibility of discovering opportunity is also very important, because then it means that you're not closing doors off because they don't align with that perceived goal that you're working towards, because it's very easy to filter things out thinking this is not contributing to what I want to do, but you never know that this might have led to something much, much bigger.
I want to talk a little bit about your background as a strategy consultant.
Yeah.
For somebody watching this, can you just quickly define? I know, it might sound obvious, but let us know what strategy consultant and what do you do?
Yeah, of course. I think consulting is the biggest scam. JK, no hate, no hate. So consultants are basically people who don't have any kind of like niche expertise. We come in to understand your problem from an overall outlook on it, and then we will go back and speak to all the experts who are relevant to specific parts, collect the data, and then build out a strategy to address whatever problems you're having. And the problems can range from either like really kind of like time pressured problems of we're not making money, or we're struggling to sell something, or it can be more at the start of a business's journey where they're trying to launch into a new market, they're launching a new product, they're thinking what they can do differently, they're thinking how to grow, or they want to merge with another company, they want to sell. So it can be very different business issues that they're trying to solve. And we come in as a third party that has no bias or no nothing. And we come in, understand your problem, and work with you to devise the solution. And this is what strategy consulting is. So we come up with a strategy at the end. And then there is a different team, usually from the same company, that will come in for the implementation of those strategies. So that's what we do.
If you look back in your career as a strategy consultant, and let's say out of maybe the last 10 companies that you've consulted when you were doing this, is there a common theme, a common challenge that most of them struggle with? That if like coming back to your 80-20 rule, is there like 20% of the issues that led to 80% of the problems in most of these?
So I've worked in varied industries, first of all, because I was new to the job. So they make you try everything, which is great. So I've tried financial services, healthcare, tech, petrol, oil and petrol, and also worked on really weird things like wildlife and trying to bring back extinct species of cheetahs and things like that. So their actual problems were very different from each other, and the actual solution and the next steps they wanted as well were different. Some of them just wanted a high level thinking. Some of them wanted actual practical tips that can be implemented in a short term. Others were long term. Obviously, bringing back species is a 10 years job. But I would say that the one thing I see across businesses, which hopefully more and more people are realizing is the issue, is communication. I think internally, everyone struggle with communication, mostly because there's no upward feedback per se. Technically, a lot of companies do say that, yeah, we do upward feedback, but how transparent is that? How comfortable does someone feel to give that upward feedback is also very questionable. I remember once this was not nothing bad, but my first project, it was just me and my manager on the team, and then we had 4 partners. And at the end of every month, I think you get to fill out this anonymous survey about your manager. How anonymous is it? It's me and him. So who else could have sent this other than me?
Interesting.
So I think there are still many different ways that you can improve that communication that happens. And I think people at the top need to have their ear more on the ground at the bottom, because they might be a little bit disconnected to what's happening. And that's usually the main thing we will go and talk about, is like, you need to talk to your experts. They're there. They know what the problem is. They know what the solution is. And I think that's one thing that hopefully we're working towards. And also just highlighting a little bit better the soft skills that comes in being in the workplace, especially things that in the past were considered very feminine traits. For example, having empathy, listening skills, and negotiating in a way that's not aggressive. And especially listening is something that I think we need, like, people who are at the top to do a lot more of, because the people who are working on the ground know what the problem is and they know how to solve it. So you just need to listen to them. And I think that's one thing that's across the board.
Sheen, let's keep your strategy hat on.
Okay.
But let's just shift industries a bit.
Sure.
Let's say I'm listening to this and say, I like to talk. And I have some ideas. And Sheen is saying you can actually make a living doing that. So how would you strategize for somebody who's in that position and they're trying to get into this content game?
Okay, I think whenever someone says that, there are 2 things. You either want to get into the content game because you enjoy it, or you have something you're so passionate about you want to share with the world. Or the second one is you want to build a business around it. And there are 2 very different approaches to content. Because the first one is you do whatever the hell you want, and you will attract that niche audience that will relate to whatever you're doing. And that one will require a lot less planning and strategizing. And I think it is also the more fun one, because you have so much creative freedom and you can do whatever you want just because you just want to create content. You don't care about the performance of that content. But when it comes to building a business around it, this is where it gets a bit more tricky, and you need to strategize and have a bit of a plan. But at the same time, this is the advice I give, because last week I was doing this workshop about how to do a podcast, okay? And a lot of people, the main question is, what are the monetization routes? How do we do it? And these people don't even have a podcast yet. So this is really, what do they call it? Like putting the cart ahead of the horse, right? So it doesn't work like that. You need to start by deciding. So there's a whole process that you need to do, right? The first one is decide who is the target audience you're speaking to, what is the problem they're having that you think you can fix, or what is the one thing they're interested in that you're also interested in, and you can provide a bit of a different take on it. Great, you know who you're talking to. Next thing is, what is the format of the way you're speaking? Are you going to be filming in a studio at home? What is the equipment you need? And, is it just you solo? Do you want to have guests? Do you want to have a co-host? So all of these things you need to now iron out. Now that you know the format of it, the next thing is, figuring out the logistical part of it, your logo, the branding, the description of every episode. What is the theme of a season? Are you doing seasons? So all of this is like the actual to-do list of it. Now, when you get to the actual filming and posting the content and making sure you're posting everywhere to reach that target audience, you need to be a little bit here, a bit more focused about who is the target audience that can maybe bring you money, or what is the theme that you can talk about where you might attract more sponsors. But again, I feel like these thoughts should come way down the line. And this is something that content creators who are way bigger than me have said. And Jay Shetty said this to me as well, where he was like, you need to have at least 50 pieces of content before you even think about asking someone to collaborate with you or asking for a sponsorship deal. Because 50 pieces of consistent content, by the way, not just one in a year and then 49 in another year. So it's like having a proper, you're showing that you are committed to it. you are consistent, and 50 will mean that you have gone through the ups and downs, and that if you are still committed to it, you're still posting. So after you are posting that regularly and doing all of this, then it means that, okay, you're serious with this, and now you also know better what your audience is, what is your strength, how are you different from the rest of the market. And at this time is when you start to strategize, thinking, how do I monetize this? And it should be the time as well when maybe more business opportunities will come your way. And I think that that's the thing as well. When I talk about the different ways I monetize it, some of the ways of it I never thought was possible. For example, getting paid to appear on a podcast, or getting paid to come to an event just to be present at that event, is not something you would think is possible. And just like recently, I did a podcast which was so interesting. It was with someone who speaks Russian only, and I do not understand Russian. And for a minute, I was like, how is this going to work? And then they had two translators. We each had the thing in our ear, and then having to train myself to look at this person, but listen to my ear instead of listening to what they're saying. So because things are evolving so quickly, right? You never know where does the monetization come from. So that's why I would say that yes, there are potential of making money, but making money should not be your priority from day one. And also, if you keep thinking about making money, your audience will not connect to you. And this is one thing, even, us as content creators now, when you do brand deals and stuff, you have to be so careful not to give the ick to your audience about the fact that, you're just selling too much. And that's, again, if you're selling things that align with what the audience needs, they will love it. But if they can tell that, okay, every day she's posting about a random thing that is not related to what she uses or what she does on a daily basis, you lose their loyalty. And this is something that you cannot get back. So being careful about monetization down the line, I will say, is so important. So yes, there are ways of making money, but start with the content creation first. Give value for free, build that audience, and the money will come.
I have a question about branding, but first I want to ask you about, I like the 50 piece of content.
Yeah.
I've heard that because a lot of people overthink, what should I do? No, just create content. And then would you suggest people start with one platform, one format, or diversify across all the platforms?
100% diversify, because you don't know which platform is going to be yours. So even for me, when I started the podcast, first season was fully audio. I did not want to be on camera. I only recorded the audio. And then I realized that because at the time, especially with Spotify and Apple Podcasts, there's no comment section. So I don't know how people are feeling about this podcast. They can rate it, but how many people actually sit there and rate your podcast? They don't. So then for the next season, I was advised to then start a YouTube channel, put the video version up there so people can now interact with you. You can interact with your audience. And I was like, okay, cool. So then I started that, and I saw the difference. And also, people want to connect with you, right? And they want to see you. They want to watch that conversation. So then I started the YouTube. And for me, for a very long time, I thought YouTube is going to be my platform. This is the one where I feel like my audience is at. This is where they're resonating with my content better. I never tried anything else. I didn't have TikTok until last year. And I had a personal Instagram. It was public, but I wasn't posting much on it. Excuse me. I would post stories that would direct them to my YouTube channel. That's it. But then when I started filming in a studio, I started cutting them down into smaller reels and posting them on Instagram and TikTok, just thinking, let's see what happens. And that's where it blew up. It blew up on Instagram. And now all of my money comes from Instagram. And YouTube has an inbuilt money generating system, but still it's Instagram that's making the money, because that's where it grew. That's where my audience is. And that's where now I've built this really cool group of people who are interested in my audience, who are interested in what I do, what I have to say. So, and now TikTok has also followed suit. So there is no need to restrict yourself to one part. And for me now, for example, when one episode comes out on a Monday, the full video goes on YouTube, the audio goes on Spotify. I will cut the clips that will go on Instagram and TikTok across the week. And also I write a summary of that episode that goes on LinkedIn. So I use every possible platform I have, because you will be surprised how something will do extremely well. It will go to like 2 million on TikTok, and it didn't pick up anywhere else. And then something will go to 200,000 views on YouTube and doesn't pick up anywhere else. So why would I restrict myself, you know? And you already have the content. Cross-posting is the best thing you can do. Just diversify your platforms.
That's excellent advice.
Yeah.
Back to branding. Now,
Sure.
I think branding is such an overused word today. Everyone's telling you, you need a personal brand. You have to work on your brand. You have to do it this way. You have to do it that way. Everybody seems to be like a brand expert. My question to you is, as you watch people like, Logan Paul create, companies like Prime that are competing with the likes of Coke, Mr. Beast, how important is building a solid brand, not just from a personal perspective, but even as a business? And how would you go about in creating that brand?
Okay, so personal brand and business brand are very different things, right? And I think in today's time, whether it is a company or a person, you need a personal brand. Because when you think about it, the audience is a lot more picky now. Especially, I think this switch really happened during COVID, when people were forced to be at home and starting to really question everything that they do, starting to question, why do I buy this? Why do I like this company? And do I really need this? So now they care a lot about things that we should care about, like sustainability, like the ethics behind, are people being paid fairly? Are they respectful to all the races and genders and everything? So in order for you to be able to compete with whoever is around in the market, you need to show your story. And that's what now local brands are doing better, right? When you even look around in this region, a lot of the local restaurants, the local clothing, people feel strongly about it and they want to support. That's why it's important to kind of like have that story that will also add some leverage to whatever you're doing. So that's for a business. And for you as a person, again, I love to talk about this because I think of it this way. So where did you grow up, you said?
Born in Somalia, raised in America, living in Dubai.
Okay, so me being Mauritian, and let's say you being from Somalia originally, what is the likelihood of us meeting if I stayed in my little coastal village in Mauritius and you stayed in Somalia? We would have never met, right? But you went to America, and the likelihood of you meeting someone from Mauritius is much higher. And you moved to Dubai, which is closer to Mauritius, the likelihood of us meeting went even higher, and now we've actually met. And similarly, putting yourself online increases the likelihood of any opportunity or anything good happening to you. And I like to think that you're increasing your surface area for serendipitous things to happen to you by just putting yourself out there. And the story I have personally for me, where my personal brand changed my life, is when COP28 was happening here. And the Gates Foundation wanted someone in the UAE who could help them with a campaign. And they were like, okay, we really needed someone who's doing women empowerment stuff. And obviously, because that's my niche, I came up quite high in their search. And next thing I know, within 48 hours, I was in Kenya filming with Bill Gates, right? And that, I could have never planned this. It could never be on my vision board, It's not something that you think is possible. I was in Kenya in a cowshed filming a podcast, right? And with female farmers, and completely blew my mind too. And it opened the horizons of the potential things that can happen from this completely. And how did that happen? Just by me increasing my surface area, right? And just putting myself online means that you don't even know in which rooms people are talking about you. And that means that the number of things that can come your way is incredible. So why would you not do it? And I honestly can say this with full conviction that I do not know anyone who started a personal brand and did not get something amazing along the way. And a lot of people think, okay, I want to start, let's say, content creation, and I want to reach 1 million. You might not reach 1 million, but something else will happen. You might meet someone who becomes your business partner. You might meet someone who, completely gives you an opportunity that puts you on a book or like something, but something or the other will happen along the way. And I do not know anyone who's regretted it. You might not reach the goal you had in mind initially, but new and better things happen. So what is the harm in it? And especially in today's time where you're constantly kind of like competing with everyone else for a lot of things, whether it is for clients, whether it is for a sale or it is for a job. You need to be different. And how can you be different is by showcasing who you are. Because in a meeting with a client or in an interview, how much of yourself can you really put out there? Not that much. But if they Google you and they can at their own pace consume what you do, and I don't mean everyone needs to do video, by the way, like content takes very different forms, but if they can read up about you, they can see a little bit more about the personal aspects of whatever you do, what are the reasons you do the things that you do, then that creates a very different idea of who you are in their brain. And I think that's super important. And obviously for companies, it's better to sell that way. And for example, right now, if you ask me, if I ask you, would you want to take like a meal delivery plan? Are you on one? But I'm sure you've heard of many of them, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. But none of them will stick out to you probably. No. Same. So when I was thinking, do I want to sign up to one? I was like, okay, but now I have decision paralysis because there's too many of them. But then one of them reached out to me and we actually ended up working together. And I went to their kitchen and I looked at everything. I was like, you guys are doing something so different. Why don't you showcase this story better? Because you will immediately stand out from the rest of the people. And that's how you can literally attract people. And after we worked together, they realized that this is their USP and they started pushing more of that. And now they're doing better than everyone else. And I think that's why it's so important to know what's different about you and to share that message. And the way to do personal branding is obviously that's like a whole other podcast episode on how to build a personal brand. But I think building a personal brand comes from, there are really two main things about it. The first one is documenting everything that you're doing and sharing that with the world. And the second thing is authenticity. You need to be authentic in anything that you do and everything that you share, and not trying to be someone else, and that, I think that's the trap that a lot of us get sucked into is, for example, you see this is working for Gary Vee, this is working for Stephen Bartlett, I want to do the same thing. But you are not them. The reason it worked for them is because no one else was doing this when they started doing it. So now you need to find what is your singular take on something that no one else is doing and, double down on that. And that's how you become different from everyone else. And being authentic in that way is amazing because you also then connect so much easier to whoever you're trying to talk to. Because for me, the reason I feel like people still do like me is because of the authenticity. I talk very openly about the things that I liked and the things I didn't like, things that worked for me and things that didn't work for me. And I think that's one thing that I always get the comments is that it's incredible how transparent you are about things. And that builds loyalty and also it finds you the right audience that will want to stick with you. And that's a more sustainable way of growing your personal brand.
One thing as a consultant, business consultant, one thing I've always said is who you are is more important than what you do. I would go into businesses who, the owner or the person leading it is a genius. Mm-hmm. And they went to the best schools, they have the best strategies, they have the best ideas, yet they're struggling. Down the street is a guy who probably never went to these schools and just struggled to get by. Yet he or she has a very successful, like I'll give you an example. I started in the dental business, so they'll be very successful practice. They have all the patients going there. They're full. Well, the guy down the street who went to Harvard University and has all these diplomas on the wall can't get a patient in, and the reason is, as you mentioned, one person is comfortable demonstrating the value that they provide. They're using all these different platforms. They're creating videos, and they're literally just talking about the same things that they do and they present to every other patient. Yet this person thinks that just because you open a practice, people will beat a path to it. Yeah. Now, another thing you mentioned is tell your story. Mm-hmm. But Sheen, most of us know our own story and we think it's boring because what's so exciting about it, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm sure you've heard that before. What would you say to somebody who's like, well, when you say tell your story, what do you exactly mean by that? And why does your story really matter?
Okay. So I think honestly, storytelling is the best thing to happen to us. And I think because even when you go back to your childhood, when you remember the stories that you heard growing up and how every kid wants to hear a bedtime story. Why is that? It's because it taps into this part of our brain where you build that universe in your head, and you have now creative control of how you want to visualize whatever is being told to you. And that's why kids love stories, and as adults we also love stories. We love to watch movies, we love to read books, and that's why even hearing someone else's story is something really cool. And that's something I absolutely enjoy, which is why obviously I do the podcast, is because listening to someone's story for me is just amazing, because we are all different, but at the same time I feel like we're all living the same life. And that's one thing you start to realize, especially for me. Obviously my target audience is women, and when you're talking to women and you hear all of these challenges that everybody faces, but somehow there is like a little underlying similarity between each of them. And I think that's the beautiful thing about, humankind. We're all connected in this community. We all have very similar patterns in our lives, but we have different experiences. And that's what makes us different and similar at the same time. So that's the beautiful part of storytelling. And honestly, I've never connected to anyone if I don't know who they are or what their story is, because that's really hard for me to know whether, this person has anything in common with us. And at the end of the day, whenever you're looking to build relationship, or you're looking to make friends, you're looking for a business partner, what you're looking for really is someone similar to you. We all want a mirror. And that's why you want to, one way of filtering and assessing that is understanding where they come from. What is their story? And I think when you say story, people think that they need to have like this incredible story that is different from everyone else. And, where I had my, what do they call it? Like the arch and everything. No, it doesn't need to be that deep. When I say story, is really, where do you come from? And even for me, when I tell you that I'm from Mauritius, you already have a bit of an idea of like, okay, I grew up on an island. So that means that, the childhood was different. All of this was different. So that gives you an insight into what is feeding into their personality and their choices in life. And sharing your story does not need to be that deep, honestly. It's just about, and people don't want to hear the happy things. And that's why for me, the only time I talk about, my journey in terms of like, what did I achieve, is when I'm asked in, it's like formal setups like this. But I don't like to talk about it otherwise, because I loved what you said about, it's not about what you do, it's who you are. And in one of the seasons of the podcast, I would ask people to introduce themselves without mentioning their education or their work. And you see the panic, right? Because everyone is so used to saying, oh, I studied there and I do this. But if you don't do this, who are you as a person? And that's where we need to feed more. And where does that come from? It's us knowing our own story and connected to who we are, what have we done over the years, what do I like doing, what do I not like doing. The best answer I got from a guest about this question was, I'm still the 12-year-old kid I was inside, and I still love the same things. I love playing games, and I love, sitting outside in the sun, but it's not something I can do anymore. And that's where you start to dig a little bit deeper. But honestly, for me, telling your story means mostly telling people about the things that were your challenges. No one cares about the happy stuff. Everyone wants to see, the redemption. Everyone wants to see someone who's been through challenges but didn't let life weather them, or people who've been through hard times and managed to find a way out of it. That's the story you want to tell. But at the same time, just being able to, instead of me coming to you being like, hey, I'm a podcaster, but me telling you, I'm a scientist and now I am a podcaster. I come from Mauritius. I've lived in different countries. It adds so many layers to who I am. And that's all I mean when I say tell your story.
I want to talk about your women empowerment initiatives.
Yes.
It's clear that that's something that you're passionate about.
Mm.
I want to know, is this something that you just decided to pursue, or was there a pivotal moment in your life that led you to this path?
Yeah, honestly, there are probably two pivotal moments for this. The first one being when I became the first girl from Mauritius to have gone to Oxford and Cambridge, and all the newspapers wanted to speak to me. And I realized that this is really odd, because even my sister is so much brighter than I am, and all the people I know in my life are incredibly achieved. But why am I the first one to do this? And then I realized that it's because there are so many barriers when it comes to girls' education. So that was the first time the bell was rung in my head about the fact that girls are still treated differently. And that's because I grew up in a household where I only have one older sister, and my dad is obviously outnumbered in that household, and he is the best supporter when it comes to us. He never made us feel like we're girls and therefore we're treated differently. If anything, I'll say this with my chest, my sister is my dad's son, you know, and like she still is. And I think because we growing up, it never flagged to us that, you know, being girls, we need to be this way, or, you know, maybe this is not accessible to us because we're girls. The fact that he even sent us to study alone and everything, you know, and even now my sister's in the US and I'm here, and we both don't live at home, and it's always been a thing where like we are treated equally. So the first time I realized that it's not the case everywhere was when that happened. So then I thought, okay, let me look into this. And then I started working with girls in the UK who come from, you know, really like downtrodden schools, and they're not given all the things that they need. And you speak to normal school girls as well in the UK, and they tell you that, oh, you know, STEM subjects are not for me because this is more of a boys subject. And then you speak to girls who are in refugee camps, and they're like, well, you know, I need to get married for my safety because otherwise, you know, what's the point of me studying? So you realize that girls have so many varied issues when it comes to advancing in life, that it is important. And I know I hate the whole you know, being a quota, being a number. You don't want to be the diversity hire either, and I think many times. But it's just that until we fix the source of the problem, the people who are already in the system needs to be supported. So we can't say, oh, you know, but this is just like a tick box exercise. It is, but what do you want me to do? I can't go back and fix these people's childhoods. And the only thing we want is, we don't want to be handed anything, but everyone needs to start at the same starting line, you know, and that's how we make things equal. And if someone is not starting at that line, just give them the boost for them to come up there, and then that's it. So that's how I started being active in there. And I guess the biggest push as well for me, again, when I got super excited about it, was my aunt became the first female president of Mauritius. And that was a huge, like, whoa, okay, that's possible. And she was not even in politics or anything. She's also a scientist. And she was kind of like hand selected because we needed a woman to become the president, because in Mauritius we elect the prime minister and they appoint the president. And again, that for me, it blew my mind. And seeing after that how many girls wanted to join politics and the impact she had throughout, was the ripple effect of that was incredible, even for us, because now you think, well, okay, there's no limit. We can go anywhere. And just because growing up, I never had a role model to look up to, because all the successful women and stuff, nobody looks like me. No one speaks like me. No one has the same background as me. But now I could see somebody who is basically an older version of me and is there. And I thought, okay, we need to show women about the possibilities, because seeing something opens something in your brain as well. And I think that's why now the main thing I try to do with the podcast is to share the stories of how, firstly, women are doing so many things and they are everywhere now. There's no, okay, this is a male dominated area or whatever. The main conversation is always, how do you thrive in a male dominated area, which means everyone is there. And at the same time, the other thing is a little bit similar to what you're doing, is talking about how do you pivot when things do not work, and the importance of knowing that you are not stuck to wherever you are. We're no longer in that generation. For example, my dad retired after 33 years of working in the same place. And I've been in the workforce for 3 years and I resigned 4 times. So, you know, he doesn't quite get me, but because that's where we are moving towards now. The future of work looks different. And even, you know, there was this statistics that came up that by 2030, 85% of the jobs on the job market are not even created today. So, you know, so what are you training for? Because the jobs that will exist down the line don't exist today. So what can you do? Obviously not panic, but what you can do is train yourself to be adaptable. So adaptability is key. And I think that's what I'm trying to teach women as well, is that, we have everything we need. We have every tools we need to adapt. It's just about getting out of your own way and letting things happen for you. So yeah.
Sheen, as a father of two daughters,
Okay.
I want to make sure that they grow up knowing that they can do anything they want.
Yeah.
That they're not. I have two boys and two girls.
Okay.
So I want them to have the same opportunities and the same possibilities as my boys will.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm also a realist. There will be some opportunities that's not going to be equal. Like for example, in sports, they're never going to get paid the same amount as men.
Yes.
That's and for the right reasons as well.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's all these cases, but what can what advice would you give to people who are working with young women, young
Mm-hmm.
girls, to ensure that they grow up with confidence, with the ability to know that they too can achieve anything that they set their mind to, and nothing else is going to limit them other than themselves?
Oh, I have the best story for this, because yesterday I had dinner with someone, and he's called Simon. He's an incredible author as well, and he has a daughter who's 4 years old. And we were having this same conversation about how do you raise your kids now in order to make sure that they are not they're not left behind, and you're not perpetuating what has been done across generations. And he was saying how because he is a speaker, he's on stage at all times. His daughter is always the first one to raise her hand whenever I ask a question. And now she's taken to singing. And he was like, she just belts it out. She has no second thought. She's not shy. And she just does it because for her, being on stage is something very normal, because she's seen her dad do it over the years. And for her, maybe taking the stage takes a different form of singing, but she has no shame. She is just out there. And even the teachers were always very impressed by how confident she is with sharing. Even when she's wrong, it doesn't affect her. She will still raise her hand the next time. And so therefore, my first thing there is by doing, it's always by example. Kids absorb so much from around them. And, the way they will see their mom being treated, the way they will see their teachers being treated, all of that really fine tunes the way they see the world. So that's how, first of all, you will build confidence, is by showing by example that we are that way. And these are the things that we do. And I also had this chat with this positive psychologist, and she said that it's really hard to be positive all the time. Even as a parent, you have your down times, and there are times where you're really struggling to answer a million questions from a kid. And she was saying how for her, the way she deals with it is, if she's having a bad day, she will tell her kid, I'm having a bad day today. All of these things happen, and I am still processing it. And it's okay to feel sad about things when things don't work out your way. But then we find a way to work out of it. Accept your emotions and feel it, and then you move on. And she was saying how she has been incredibly baffled by how her son is emotionally intelligent at that age, because he's being involved in that. He sees it, he absorbs it. So that's number one, just setting the right example. And obviously the second thing is, I think, creating the right environment around us, right? So we need to play our part. And I know it is so easy to feel like, well, can I really change a global system of how things are? As you said, the way that women are paid differently and things like that. Can I really do anything that will change that across the globe? Well, it all starts with what we do, right? Around us. What little thing can I do to make it a little bit better? And I don't know, have you heard of the starfish story? The little girl and the starfish?
I don't think I have.
So there was a storm, and a lot of starfish were washed onto the shore. And once they're out of water, after a while, they die. So that's when they become hard, because they're actually soft underwater. And this little girl is walking down the shore, and he's just picking them one by one and throwing them back into the water. And there are hundreds and hundreds of them across a really long beach. And this old man approaches her being like, little girl, what are you doing? There's no way you will be able to save all of these starfish. Why are you wasting your time? And she picked one up, and she was like, yeah, but it makes a difference to this one. And then she throws it back. So it's saying that the impact that you have doesn't need to be for everybody. But if you have an impact on even one person, that's enough. And that's why even when it comes to what we can do as, for example, business owner, as a manager, everything that you do, the team you're fostering as a man as well, being an ally, like really making sure that your female colleagues are being treated equally as you. Or if you see something, standing up for that person and saying something, and not, because the other thing is, not participating is one thing, but watching and not saying anything is also equally bad. So you need to step in to break all of these bad habits that we have built over the years. And honestly, that's the main two things: just making sure that we are setting the right example, and we are doing what we can within our limits in order to make things better.
Is this something that had an impact on you? I mean, I'm not sure how you were raised growing up, or how much confidence your parents instilled in you, because I feel as people get older and you start to have those thoughts of change and going into this uncertain world, it really would make a difference in having, a bit of confidence, a bit of belief. But if most of your childhood you're told you're not good enough, whether you're a man or whether you're a boy or girl, you can't do this. Your parents just kind of limited you to whatever their beliefs were. Do you think this is something that really holds people back as they get older?
Oh, 100%. I think, again, I've been so lucky that my parents were very much like, they supported us in a way right from the start. And I think 100% my confidence comes from that, the way I was raised, and the way, especially my mom is a very, strong-willed woman, and she would never accept any kind of, injustice. And if something was done to us, she will never step in. She'll be like, you go fight your own battle. You tell them this is wrong. And even in school, when I would get into fights and stuff, she would always be like, but why did you accept it? She would like, just go and tell them no. So we were kind of like nurtured right from the start to stand up for ourselves, because again, that gives you that confidence that I can do it myself. I don't need someone to come in and save me. And my sister, equally, the older sister that I have, she's always been someone who has also been very tough love kind of person. So whenever I would complain about anything, she would listen and be empathetic about it, but then she'd be like, but you need to sort it out. Like, no one is coming to sort it out for you. And just generally kind of like, when it came to school, obviously I was a good student, so my parents never had any issue with that. If anything, I put pressure on myself. But the way they would approach anything that we would do, for example, if I would want to perform music day or whatever, they would always come and like celebrate us, and that meant that for me, being on stage was like a fun thing, and I really loved it. And if we did something bad, if mistakes happened, there's always a conversation around it, rather than, very like, obviously I will be punished, grandparents after all, but you will be punished, but also understanding why you're being punished and why this was wrong. And I think having that open lines of communication is what always helped. And unfortunately, it's not the case for everybody. And I have seen it up close about how my friends have struggled with this. And even now, as grown adults, they're still struggling with having like their parents on their side, or parents still telling them that what you're doing is wrong. Especially in the content creation arena, someone who's like super successful, making millions and millions of dollars, and their mom is not happy about what they do, is still being like, oh, this is not right. You're going online, you're being a clown online, and so and I see the impact that has. Unfortunately, we have to work with the cards that life has dealt us. And if this is the case, and I think the number one thing is recognizing that the patterns of how we behave and how we feel about things, how we react to things, is always kind of like linked to our past experiences, whether childhood or teenagers or adulthood. Some of it is always there, and recognizing that this is the problem is step one. Of course, step two is finding the right tools and the right help in order to mitigate the impact that this has on your life, because this is not something you want to carry for the rest of your life.
Sheen, social media is obviously something that transformed our life. Now it's AI. Obviously, the pros and cons for both are different. I mean, in my opinion, I feel like social media, even though you can do a lot of great things with it, you can build a business, you can build your brand, but there are people who just consume it for the wrong reasons. They spend hours and hours flipping through one video to the next, which is not great. But eventually you're just kind of harming your time and yourself if you're doing that. Where now in AI, as you mentioned, you can have deep fakes.
Mm-hmm.
You can have someone calling your parents and asking them for money, as you've seen
Mm-hmm.
happen. But also, the opportunities are greater, I believe, with AI. So, can you quickly talk about what are some of the things that people were currently doing as work and might not be required to? I know you mentioned copywriting, but I'm sure there's a lot of other things that we can use for to do with AI and not need our team to do it anymore.
Yeah, for sure. I think, and it links very nicely to social media. So, yes, you're right. Social media is majority good, but also bad. And unfortunately, now, even though we are more connected than ever, loneliness is at its peak when it comes to young people, especially. And that's because we feel connected online, but offline, people are not building relationships. So, that's one problem. And social media comes with its own downfalls. But when it comes to AI, yes, there are some threats to it, especially in terms of how it will be implemented and how it is regulated. But majority also good. So a lot of good things will happen from it. So if you think of it in terms of like a solopreneur, someone who's running a business alone without a team, there are a lot of things that AI can do to help you, whether it comes to, script writing, copywriting, writing email templates, even doing your brainstorming for you. So, for example, the other day we were looking for a new name for a new business, and you ask for specific words or specific things, and it really helps you with the brainstorming session, even if it doesn't come with the right thing for you. So, in terms of even creative thinking, you can start to use it. And now they have all these new technologies where you can even create a full video with AI. And I don't know if you've seen, but there's this famous influencer now in Dubai who is an AI. She doesn't exist, right? And she was created, her whole thing was created, and she has 500,000 followers. And so even influencers might not be needed anymore. Imagine now you can just have this person posting pictures and also just filming videos. And I don't know if you saw that picture that went viral when they came up with it, where you had all these animals coming out of water and stuff, where AI completely created that thing to the minute details. So that means that now even you don't need someone who does your social media management, because AI can do that. You can send your prompt, be like, for this logo, can you build this picture? We have this poster, do this. And now you don't need a social media manager. So honestly, it can help and support solopreneurs really well. And even when it comes to other jobs, whether it is like people who do coding a lot, it is amazing. I've heard the software engineers rave about it, how you just tell it, give me the codes for this, and it will tell you. So now it's supporting industries across the front. But it depends again on how you use it and whether you know the limits of it and you don't copy paste. And obviously, the good thing about AI is that if two people search for the same thing, you don't get the same answer. So that means that it is still a little bit different, but at the same time, there are two main dangers we need to be careful of. The first one is that we don't become so passive that we're no longer learning any new skill or any new knowledge because we're so dependent. So that means that if tomorrow AI goes, that's it, you're done. And the second thing is just making sure that ethically we're doing the right thing. So, for example, for a student to just go online and write a prompt and copy paste that is not ethically correct. And again, for different things where, for example, if you are copying someone's work or something based on using AI to do that, again, ethics. And just claiming something that you have done yourself and you were not doing it yourself, again, ethically wrong. But this is a chart that I teach my students as well, is that you can think of things that are ethically wrong but lawful, right? So then that's why the law needs to also keep up with the ethics, and we need to start thinking about how do we make sure that the law is being informed by ethics and not just by what is deemed like illegal based on the old school of thoughts, because AI is completely different to anything that we have seen before.
If I own a business right now and I'm listening to this, would you advise me as a business owner to encourage all my team members to use AI? Let's say I have a content creation company,
Mm-hmm.
or do I encourage them to come up with their own ideas, or tell them no, you must use AI and must be a tool that is part of the.
I think anyone who wants to incorporate AI in their workplace need to understand AI fast. So if you wanted your team to use it, I would want you to know the extent to which AI can help, and then tell them specifically what they can use it for. And you want to know when they've used AI for this, whether it is creativity or this is something that AI gave you, because it is important, again, for transparency. And you don't want your team members to also now be entirely dependent on just using AI. So that's why it's really important for you to understand it yourself in order for you to be able to flag it. So if this is why when I've used ChatGPT so much, I know when a student will use ChatGPT, I see this is just ChatGPT. And that's why it's good to know, and it's the case with anything in business, right? If you want your team to do something, you need to know what it is first in order to be able to manage whatever is being done. So that's it.
Sheen, the last question I want to ask you is, someone watching this today, they've heard your journey, and they also want to go on their own. They might have a dream, they might have some goals they want to achieve, but there's something stopping them. It can be personal, it can be the lack of knowledge, it can be lack of opportunities. What would you say to that person? What advice would you give them to help them pursue their dreams and freedom?
Very good question. I think remembering that at any point in your life, you have a choice. Even if your back is against the wall, you still have a choice. Either you walk through the issue or you stay with the wall. And honestly, I heard this story from one of my guests and I love it. It's about bisons. So, whenever there's a storm, all animals will run away from the storm. But the bison is the only animal that will run right through the storm. It will go straight towards the storm. And it's because it knows that the shortest way out of the storm is through. Because the more you keep running from it, the more it's chasing you. But if you get out, you're done. And that's a very good metaphor for life, that whenever something is happening to you, and even that, I don't like the way I said this, because you shouldn't think that things are happening to you. Things are happening, full stop. And if anything, things are happening for you. And I think being able to know that I just need to get through it and do it, and then I will get on the other side faster than me avoiding it. And whenever I think we feel unhappy, we feel like dissatisfied or not fulfilled, and these are all red flags that our body is really trying to wave and be like, come on, this is not good for us, let's do something else. You need to recognize this and find the best way with the least barriers when it comes to kind of like financial, when it comes to support that you need, anything that you can do on your own. Find that way that is easiest and get out of it. Try to start and put that first step forward. Is the best way to get it started. And you might not have the right support at the start. And this is something that a mentor told me right from the start, which was, for a very long time, when you start something, you're the only one clapping in that auditorium. And you need to clap for yourself until other people join you. Because if you don't, then there will never be a clap. So that's why it's important to keep pushing yourself, even if people are not supportive, if you're not finding the right success that you want right from the start. But if you believe in something and you have your own dreams and aspirations towards something, you need to find the way to do it. You need to be brave. You need to get out of your own way. It is not easy. And I feel like the thing that brings me comfort is that it's not easy for anybody. We might think it is, because on social media it's very easy to think, oh, everyone has it so easy. But this is the highlight reel of everyone's life. Having been up close to a lot of really famous people, really successful people, you know that their life is not easy. They did not get there in an easy way. So just, heads down, make the decision, be brave, and just try and find the easiest way for you to do it and keep at it without necessarily putting yourself in any sort of like danger or bad place.
That is great advice. Sheen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for openly sharing your knowledge and your experience. I'm looking forward to seeing more of your success.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to listening to the whole season.
Thank you.